CRISTIAN and ANATOLY, welcome.
Hello, Malmo. So you are not in the wrong event. This is the little Baltic Ruby. He's ANATOLY. My name is CRISTIAN, and we both work as senior staff software engineers at Zendesk. It's really nice to do this talk here in Malmo because, well, this little event you had this year in the city, I think it's kind of related with what I'm going to talk about in certain ways. I mean, you will be surprised now, but this talk is about, well, the history of a Rails monolith. And you will be thinking, how is this related? Well, if you know a bit about the vision, you know that music doesn't really matter that much. The main thing is the politics, the drama, the mess, no? The drama, let's say. And okay, CRISTIAN, but how is this drama related to the Ruby community? Repeat it aloud. How is drama related to the Ruby community? I mean, how is nothing else than drama? We are the most dramatic programming language community ever. Like, it took me like 3 minutes to remember all these stories. I mean, I'm not criticizing this. Actually, I absolutely love the drama. Huge entertainment value. Like Matt was saying that open source communities go down when people get bored. We will live forever. I mean, I really mean it. Like a few years ago, I tried to learn Scala. I went to a few conferences, and well, I'm not going to put real pictures, but the average Scala speaker in a conference looks like this. This is how our speakers look. So yeah, well, let's start talking a bit about the topic of the talk. This talk is a little bit about time. There was a moment right now in my life that I decided to think about the last years of my career. There were multiple reasons. One of them is that after 10 years living abroad, I moved back to Barcelona. The other is that it was my 10th anniversary working at Zendesk. And finally, hopefully I'm not the only nerd that knows about this, but I started watching this TV show. Great, people of culture. Frieren is this anime show about typical elves, warriors, wizards, and it follows a certain tradition of having magic, but you can read magic as a metaphor of certain things, specifically technology. I love fantasy novels, and I love to see the parallelism in between how they use magic and how we use technology. My favorite example of this is this novel, A Wizard of Earthsea, of Ursula Le Guin, where the idea is that you can do magic if you know the true name of things. I always thought that this is like about abstractions, about if you create this perfect abstraction, you really can control much better from an object-oriented programming perspective. I mean, all this is not my idea. Like Arthur C. Clarke has this quote: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Okay, and how is Frieren relevant about all this? What's the metaphor of Frieren? Well, in Frieren, the main character is this immortal elf. She lived around 2,000 years when the show starts. And all the show is based on flashbacks. So you can see how life was 100 years before, in the present. So you see that certain spells, read technologies, created a revolution on magic read technology. It's actually fascinating to see it like this. Moreover, I think that for ANATOLY and I, it was kind of natural to identify with this character. I mean, she's an elf that lived over 1,000 years. She's like this kind of rare existence in this magical world. That makes her the possessor of forgotten, forbidden magical knowledge. ANATOLY and I would say we are equally mythical. We are engineers that have been in the same company for 10 years, which is really rare, I would say. And this makes us possessors of forgotten, forbidden, magical Rails knowledge. We would like to share it. I will start talking about the monolith, not about only the monolith that we have at Zendesk, but about the concept of monolith and how it evolved in the last 10 years. So that was me 10 years ago. And in the early 2010s, people liked all kind of weird stuff. Was the monolith one of these weird things that we don't like anymore? Well, I don't know. 5 years ago, monolithical architectures were extremely out of fashion. I think lately there's been a comeback, like the debate is a bit more balanced. For me, it's not surprising. I always believe that a lot of debates in software engineering behave like pendulums. Opinions become very radicalized in both ways through decades, actually. With this, I don't mean that your opinion doesn't matter. There are pendulums that are dangerous. If you go too much on an extreme on certain direction, you can get hurt. I remember, for example, there was a moment maybe around 7 years ago where NoSQL was extremely fashionable. Relational databases were supposed to disappear. Was pretty extreme at that moment. I wonder what happened to companies decide to throw down all relational databases. I don't know. But I do have even more spicy opinions like that. I do believe that the microservice boom that we had is a zero interest rate phenomena, meaning companies had a lot of money and decided to use it to make optimizations before the point that they needed them. Actually, it's funny because I wrote this presentation. I made the first time a few months ago, and then after DHH tweeted something pretty similar. But I really mean it. I mean, I don't want to say here that you should never use microservices. I would actually, in the company, I am all the time pushing for creating new services when it makes sense. But come on, I mean, there are a few months ago, I visited a friend of me in Montreal, and he told me about this company he was working on. He described me the architecture, and it was this super crazy complex architecture. And I thought, wow, I'm happy for you because it sounds like you are doing great. They were not doing great. Even now that seems like, unfortunately, there is less money and there is layoffs. I wonder, like these companies that have like thousands of services, how do you manage this when your workforce has been reduced by 50%? That's painful. But still, I want to insist. There are space for microservices. They make sense in a lot of situations. I don't think like Elon Musk, even if I think this tweet is hilarious, particularly coming from the CEO of Twitter, that he called microservices bloatware. I mean, that's insane. My opinion is more similar to Jason Warner's, the GitHub CTO. It's an spectrum. You should start with monoliths most probably if you are starting a new company. You need to find market fit. You need to be able to iterate fast, and then from there, break down that monolith into more services. This is somehow what we end up doing at Zendesk, despite there was a lot of discussions and changes of opinion in our engineering. Additionally, the first CTO we had, Morten, had this vision. Like we created a monolith in Rails 1. And the idea was we are going to extract parts of this monolith into gems. And then when we want to spin a service or a new application, we will just use those gems and we'll be saving a lot of time. Like a lot of base mold different engines that we'll be able to share. This is actually how our gem file looks right now. All this Zendesk underscore, all of these are internal libraries that are not public and we use. Then later, in the mid-2010s, we moved to what I call the service era. And the reason for this was that we started to grow a lot, and we started to acquire companies. And for example, if you acquire a new company and you want to share the account data, the user data, and you don't want that your first product becomes some kind of central service for everything. So that's how we started extracting functionality. And then later, currently we are in what I call the event-driven architecture era, where different applications generate events through Kafka, and those are consumed by other applications that generate other events, and that is how it works. Still, we still have a very big monolith, and we experiment a bit with modularization because it's way too big. Well, not too big, but it's really big. We're starting playing with Packwork from Shopify, trying to create more clear limits in between different parts of the code. Still, I wouldn't want to move from this part to talk about the history of Rails without leaving a bit of comments on what happened on the front end. I mean, I joined the industry very early 2010s, and I mean, again, was crazy times. Actually, this slide is very good with all the fire in the back. Because if you don't remember, 2010 in the front-end side was like I call them the great JavaScript wars. I mean, you entered Hacker News every week. There was a new JavaScript framework, which I think still happens. But the difference then is that all of them were getting a lot of traction. Everything that you did in JavaScript in 2010 was getting used by a lot of people. Actually, at Zendesk, we had that. Like different, very big applications used by millions of users, really, were written with different frontends. Backbone, Ember, and React. I mean, the passion of JavaScript engineers for creating their own frameworks is famous. We at Zendesk have something that we call car.js. It has a different name. The point is that someone called Cart, nobody remembers his last name anymore, created his own internal framework. This is obviously not documented because it's and we have had to maintain it for almost a decade now. Actually, I would like to use this opportunity. If Cart, if you're listening, send us an email. Said this, I think like us, like a lot of other companies, kind of voted for React. I end up, centralizing our efforts in rewriting a lot of our front-end code in React. And I love React. I use it a lot. But I love React Native in particular. But sometimes I wonder if the reason for the victory of React is not that it's great, but just that people just got very tired of having to learn all these new JavaScript frameworks all the time. Next, I would like to talk about infrastructure and deployment, how we changed in the last 15 years. Originally, we were using VPS services, Engine, Yard, and Rackspace. And you can read a bit in some articles I will share with you later. But the situation is that we outgrew them. Like it was a point that I think for them even it didn't make sense to support us. We were way too big for the kind of customer that they wanted to have. So in the early 2010s, we moved to our own metal. And that lasted for around 5 years. And at a certain point, we decided that we wanted to go to the cloud, AWS. And this is how we are right now. We have Aurora, all the pods are in AWS. We've been like this for a while. I don't want to get very deep into this. We actually have a couple of blog posts that are interviews with our original CTO, and you can learn way more there. Yeah. Next, I would like to comment on how we adopt new technologies in this very big company. I think we are, how many engineers we are? Probably around 1,000 across, I don't know, more between 10 and 20 offices all around the world. So a lot of different people that wants to use different technologies. Again, I would say that we are, particularly support, our main product is still kind of a Ruby shop. We use a lot of Ruby, but we do use other things. And how we use new things, how we choose what to do. Well, once upon a time, it was very easy to add new technologies to the stack. I mean, you have things like car.js, but you just needed to talk with your manager, and that was it. That was not a good idea. Mainly because you have 1,000 engineers that have very different points of view. They have very different experiences. You end up with something that is incredibly unmaintainable because you cannot maintain 100 different languages. So we have something we call the tech menu. The idea here is that you want to add a new technology, a new storage, a new whatever. Fantastic. You write a proposal, and then the architects review it. We have a team of architects, and accept it or reject it. There has been some famous discussions about this at Zendesk. Maybe my favorite is the one that we had to decide which language to use to write microservices or services. I was Team Elixir. We lost. And then eventually the company accepted 2 languages, Java and Scala. It's interesting because in the company, when you have such a large company, you have very big orgs. And there were 2 orgs that maintain those 2 different languages. I would say that right now, Java has become the winner in this space, mainly because, not because Scala is a bad language, but because it was very hard for us to hire and to onboard new engineers in Scala. So it just became easier for everyone to just use Scala, to just use Java. Still, the most common way for a new technology to make it into Zendesk is via acquisition. These are our main products. And around half of them came via acquisition. As an example, we used our first acquisition that was Zobim, a chat company from Singapore. We acquired them exactly 10 years ago, I think. And they were a Python shop. So like this, you can be hired by Zendesk and do Python if you work at Zobim. Still, the most interesting part of all this, of acquiring a company, is what I call the domain fusion. So imagine the following. We at Zendesk, we are a customer support company. We do tickets. Zopim was a chat company. They don't do tickets. It's a chat. So then suddenly you want to integrate company B that has a completely specific domain model to chat into company A that does tickets. That's a very peculiar problem. No? You need to transform something into completely something else. It's like a bit like in Star Trek, like I think the Zorks. I don't know much about this TV show. But so then it starts a very big discussion from almost a conceptual point of view. What is a ticket? What is a chat? What is a conversation? Now we have a voice system. What is a call? No? I mean, this is a product problem, first of all. when a company acquires another, if you want it to have a common experience, it needs to be nice. It needs to make sense. It cannot feel that you bought something and just attach it. It needs to have a common experience. Still, it obviously has deep consequences on the technical side. If a company that you acquire works completely asynchronously, and while your original product is completely synchronous, works via web requests, you need to make it in a way that feels fluid. In the end, we realized that we needed that different objects would share a lot of different features. Our customers have tickets, but then they have conversations, but they want to be able to do exactly the same things in both. What we ended up doing is defining an essential brick for across all Zendesk. In our case, is the ticket, and this is how we share features. So eventually, almost everything that you do at Zendesk eventually generates a ticket. Yeah, and now Anatoly will tell you a bit about database performance.
Hi everybody. Have my paper notes, so I don't trust phones. Right, okay. So my first question will be, so this is my first slide. I don't see Mats here, I don't know, but this is the slide for him, like to show like appreciation to our Japanese-made product. I use Ruby at work. My guitar is made in Japan, and my watch is on my wrist, also made in Japan. How many of you use Ruby like more than 15 years, 18 years? Quite a few, okay. So I started with Ruby 1.8.7, like many years ago, and it's still my favorite language. So now I want to show like some sign of appreciation to Sweden. Does anybody know like what the type of the furniture I talk about? Okay, I don't have to tell a name because I'm not allowed. Okay, and also my favorite guitar player is from Sweden. Does anybody know whom I'm talking about? Maybe Malsny. I suppose not to take the name, but yes, it's okay. Furniture is very important for Zendesk, right? No, it's not. But this is what my home looked like when I moved, like before pandemic. You see, even moving boxes are made from IKEA. It's like extremely modular and useful to have it. And if it breaks, you buy it again. But this is not the home of your dream. Maybe this is the home of your dream. And this is the slide to for me to start talking about something about what I do at work. Okay. A moment of silence. Okay, if you have been to Ireland, many people, so many people have been to Ireland. So this is the slide is not surprising for you because we believe we don't have summer, we don't have sunshine, so we live in the dark. It's not true, but this is what we think. And I live in Ireland 15 years, and it's exactly how I feel. A large system is exactly like weather. So large complicated system like a Zendesk, very similar to weather. It's unpredictable. It can rain. 15 minutes later, it will be sunshine. 15 minutes later, it will storm. Large systems are challenging. You don't know what to expect. And in large organizations and systems, you see that the decisions are being made is not what you expect. So a large complicated system makes its own decisions. This is the slide I stole from CRISTIAN, and I tried to adapt it to database performance, which I talk about the most. All happy systems are alike. Each unhappy system is unhappy in its own way. It's a tragedy, but like so many little things have to be done right and in order, and one little thing can break it all. For Zendesk, that little thing, or like so many things will be aligned, and one thing breaks, and the database. So when we talk about is Ruby fast, is Ruby slow? Well, I don't care. If my database is slow, it doesn't matter what else. Like, what's the next thing to be slow? That's why past maybe 8 years, I focus on a database pretty much all my time. So database for Zendesk is the biggest bottleneck. And this is what happened. Did anybody hear about Amdahl law? Okay, so you understand the slide. So first orange line, linear complexity. If you have no data, does anybody have no data in your system? So you essentially write to dev null and you don't read. Nobody. Okay, so don't look at this line, look at the blue color line and green color line. Small startup follow a small data set curve, we follow large data set. So when we hit a moment of I don't have a mouse thing, okay. When we hit some point of contention and the data set changes your complexity and response time, you have to fix a database, not the application. So the data structure dominates. Happy systems have one thing in common: performant databases, right? But performant databases have 3 things in common. You have to choose 2: consistent runtime and complex queries. But then you can't have large data set. If you have large data set, what you prefer? Complex queries or consistent runtime? 2 out of 3. You cannot have all 3. And all 3 represents the history. Oh, I see Mats. Mats, you missed the very important slide about Japan, but I'll show it to you later. This is the Zendesk history, the past of the organization. Our data set was relatively small compared to where we are today. So query runtime was relatively consistent, and queries could be anything. And by anything, I mean you were able to mix all up and OLTP queries. You can mix transactional queries and also analytical queries at the same time on the same database. Data set was small, relatively small, and it did not cause the issues. That's what happened later. Large data set end up in a situation where the query runtime had to be revisited, the best word I can find. But this is not the future. This is the future. No complex queries. So product team, engineering team, leadership understand the complexity that comes to the system when you have too much data. And one thing which we focus the most is to eliminate all the complex queries. So certain things you cannot do. And I took something from Wikipedia. It's called the Pareto law. The Pareto law tells you that 80% something is responsible for 20% of something else. For example, 20% of all your database queries and application is responsible for 80% of what your customer need. Also, 20% of your query consume 80% of resources. And if you're cost conscious, that 20% of queries optimization brings 80% of the query performance improvements. So that's my message, that Ruby is not slow, database is. Back to Christian.
Testing and reliability. How do you maintain such a big monolith used by millions of people in the world reliable? Well, the answer for Zendesk is test. But first I would like to comment about a debate that we used to have a lot, or we have right now in the Ruby community. There's the idea of test versus types. Originally the value proposal in Ruby particularly, but in Rails, was that you need tests because you need them, and then with tests you don't need types anymore. That would be the basic concept. Like you are testing things through the tests themselves, so types became superfluous, become just hard to read. As you know about the DHH fight with TypeScript. A lot of people in the community believes that. But I think that lately there is more discussion. Ruby 3 came with, I don't remember the name, but with a type system, kind of. We have Sorbet, there is another initiative in the space. The thing here at Zendesk is that in this discussion, we extremely fall on the side of test. We don't have basically any type checker in the monolith, and we extremely use a lot of tests. This is important because we have a lot of code. It is around over 1.6 million lines of code, of Ruby code, and that's not counting all those internal gems that I talked in the beginning. Okay, and then all this code, how many tests do you think we have? How many unit tests? Say a few numbers. Huh? Okay. So we have exactly, well, more or less, I counted 55,786 tests. And you will be saying, okay, how do you make sense of all that? Well, we have a secret weapon. This is not a true picture of him. He's an engineer. His name is, he's the protector of the main branch of Classic, as we call the monolith. This is him. It's called Ryan Davis. And this is his real avatar in Slack. Let me merge or I will cry. So he's kind of famous. Like the other day, I was talking with an engineer, a junior engineer we just hired. He was telling me, Christian, I'm sorry, I won't be able to deploy because I was not able to merge. There is this guy asking me to add more tests to the VR. And I was like, oh, you met Ryan. No, he's great. He's great. And also, maybe some of you know Ryan Davis because of Minitest. He's the creator and maintainer of Minitest. And then here comes the second question that most junior engineers make to me. It's like, why Minitest? And when they ask why Minitest, a lot of times they mean, why not RSpec, which is like the main player in the testing space for Ruby. Well, we have a good reason for that. As I was saying, we have a lot of tests. And actually, we ran the whole suite of tests twice for each PR. I will explain you why later. So this means that every time that someone does push on a PR in GitHub, we ran 111,572 tests. So, and here comes Minitest. Minitest is smaller, less magic, and way faster. When I was interviewing Ryan for this presentation, he told me that other big players in the Ruby space, like Shopify, GitHub, also prefer Minitest for this specific reason, speed. In fact, when we have been trying to change Minitest, what we try to do is make it less magic and even faster. Still, despite all the care that we take on testing, we still have pain points. Something that hurts us a lot are flaky tests. Tests that are non-deterministic and sometimes pass, sometimes they don't pass. Okay, why? Because our test suite is huge. We actually here we group them in packs of 2,000 tests. And still, imagine you have a flaky test. This means that you need to rerun 2,000 tests that can take 10 minutes to run, so it's quite a lot of time. Still, now it's way better because I don't know if you use this feature much, like GitHub Actions, but until a couple of years ago, you couldn't run one group. You need to run the whole suite of GitHub Actions. So that meant that one test fails, 111,000 tests needs to be rerun. It was a great day when they released that feature. So this is the most important thing for us to keep Zendesk reliable, I would say, is our very strict sense of ownership. We have a lot of code, and this means that we have a lot of committers. Historically, at Zendesk, at Classic, that was written 17 years ago, in 2007, there is been 2,459 different people that push code. And you will be thinking, okay, well, it's 17 years, no? I mean, most people are probably dead or retired or something. Well, that's actually not the case. Just the last year, we had 570 different people pushing code here. If you don't put some kind of clear rules around that, this will be a huge fight about who did what. So what we have is another GitHub feature. All files are owned by someone. Typically, this someone is a team. Can be multiple teams, can be one specific person. But with that, it makes it much, much easier for example, reviews. You cannot modify a file if the team that owns that file doesn't give the approval. This is incredibly important for us. And now I was talking about testing, and I told that there is something that we use tests for, and this is aggregating Rails. Of course, this is interesting because Zendesk has been using Rails for a while, again around 17 years. We were started in Rails 1.0. This is a story like the founder of Zendesk, Mikhail, used to work with DHH before he created Rails. And again, how we upgrade Rails? Via tests. Every time that we want to upgrade Rails, we define next version. So we run all the tests with the current one and the next one that we want to move. So for example, right now we are, I think, in 7.0. We want to move to 7.1. So all the tests will be run in 7.0 and 7.1. Of course, in the beginning, those tests will fail in 7.1, a lot of them. But the point is that once those tests, some of those become green, we don't allow them to go back to red. So we avoid regressions. Of course, despite all this care, there's been still historical pain points. And the main one, talking with Ryan and other people that has been some time in the company, is something that it hurts me to explain. Actually, it hurts the 25-year-old me that fell in love with Rails, because it's a technique that I used to love and I still love, but I don't use anymore. That is metaprogramming Ruby. By the way, I don't know if you've read this book. This book is fantastic. But if you use a lot of metaprogramming, like, I don't know, ghost methods, monkey patching, things can go out of hand quite quickly. You know, when you have 1,000 engineers trying to maintain an application that has a lot of metaprogramming, and you need to move from Rails 6 to 7, it's incredibly painful. Said this, we were able to keep upgrades using metaprogramming until around Rails 5. When Rails to 5 was incredibly hard. Basically, the whole suite broke if we tried. So at that point, we decided to go hard mode and try to go back to using vanilla Rails, you know, more simple Ruby than we used at that point. I also think that a lot of gems, we had been creating our own forks, and that was problematic because we were losing features that were being released in the main branch, but we couldn't merge anymore. Still, removing metaprogramming, trying to go back to main branches, took us around 2.5 years, a long time. This is like how the last year, like the amount of reductions on errors and failures. And which were the main problems that we had? Well, one was the gem stronger params. That actually this was eventually merged into Rails, I think, and it's what gave support to strong parameters in Rails 4.2. And the problem here is that we created our own fork from this, and it started to diverge to the point that we need to fix it. This meant, again, having to go to all the endpoints in our monolith, and we are talking about hundreds of endpoints, and check how we were using strong parameters. The other, actually, this is a famous problem in Rails. Actually, we're talking about the break of Python 3 before Mats was talking about that. In 5.2, we had something kind of like that. That was how the dirty attributes worked. I don't know if you remember this, but right now, if you do user.name CRISTIAN user.save, and you run user.change, it will return false because the change has been committed. In Rails 5.1, it will return true because it will remember that in the same transaction, let's say, the change happened now. We were using this very heavily across all our models, and we had to go through all the code to change how this worked. This added 6 months to the upgrade. Think, again, when you have a big company with a lot of endpoints, a lot of models, you cannot be one person changing all the models across because you do not understand the business logic there. There's a lot of work of communication, saying, please, could you check that because how all these methods work has changed. The good news is since that Herculean effort, this has been way easier. And now we are able to more or less keep up with the latest versions of Rails. My closing thoughts about this is that we have had a lot of first mover disadvantage. A lot of times we try to do something that was not done in Rails, or very few people were doing, or sometimes we were the first ones doing this in the space. So we had to pay a tax on that. Current example, I would say sharding. We've been using sharding at Zendesk since Rails 2, since Rails 3 for sure, maybe Rails 2. And of course, as you know, sharding has not been maintained, has not been part of Rails until Rails 6. So we have our own completely different system of sharding that we want to eliminate and go back to the main branch of Rails, and this is work in progress right now. My advice, if I would be able to change this and do all this over again, is, well, I think Mats was saying before, like join the party, like join us, would be like this. If you find something that is not present in Rails, don't try to fight the war by yourself. Go to Rails, create an issue, and comment, talk with people. Maybe you will find that someone had something good enough, and you can join him. Maybe nobody's working on that, and you will be the first. But share your creation with others. A lot of times we work on super cool projects, but eventually the community created its own, and you are not going to be able to maintain something as good as the whole Ruby community. Okay. We're getting to the end. And I would like to leave you with a few thoughts. this talk is a bit like the sequel of a talk Anatoly and I did last year, and that one was about scaling and performance only. The thing is that as I was considering what I was talking about, I realized that scaling is performance in the end. It's a hard problem, but not being able to scale the organization is way more than you just want. Why? Well, bad performance is kind of obvious at a certain point. I mean, sometimes the application even breaks. It's just slow. It's obvious. While what is an engineering organization, what is a good engineering organization is something very debatable. It's hard to even know how that looks. My take is that knowing your history can help. Knowing what happened in your organization and in others, so you understand how you got to this point, and maybe you can see how to move in the future. Still, I mean, for me, saying that knowing history can help is easy. I like history, and when I know something that other people don't know about the past of the org or about something, I feel like Gandalf. No, I am this guy with crazy spells that nobody knows, have secret knowledge. Still, there is the other side of the coin. There's also Saruman, that has this person, I think he's the past, saying, no, this is wrong, you should behave like that. This, for sure, if you've been working in the sector for a while, you know people like this, that, no, this shouldn't be done like that because we've never done it like this. This is wrong. Actually, there's a little anti-pattern called the frozen caveman about this. So what's the attitude that you need to take with the past, with what happened before? I like to think that, just imagine it's like the past is like a magical bar that appears in front of you and explains you stories. And the stories can be interesting, can be boring, but you should be able to take a lesson from them. You shouldn't invest you personally into what happened from it. You just should try to learn from that. Actually, I don't know if you've read the book of Dune. Now it's very popular because of the novels, but in the novels, it's very popular because of the movies. But in the book, they strongly suggest that he becomes the Kwisatz Haderach because he's able to see the future. But then when he drinks the water of life, he's also be able to connect to the past, so he controls the whole time. Well, I mean, I don't expect anyone to become here the Kwisatz Haderach and the Emperor of the Galaxy, but maybe if we reflect about the past and plan for the future, we'll be able to keep Ruby active for 100 years more. Thank you. And by the way, we're talking about keeping the Ruby community with jobs and all that. We're actually hiring in Krakow, and well, this is Baltic Ruby. So if someone lives in Krakow or wants to move to Krakow, please check our jobs.